So that was this was like early '66 that I actually moved to Hollywood. Uh, I had started off in college and done a semester there, and just said, no, there's too much going on. So I left school. Never have finished college, but golly, that was my Herb Cohen era. Played all the people that he managed. He managed Fred Neil at the time. Judy Insky, who was my first road gig. And of course Timmy, and oh gosh, several other people that he managed did some actual real recording. Went and joined the union, and you had a lot going on there in LA at that time.
It was a very fertile time.
Right. And then I got the call to come to the Buffalo Springfield because Bruce Palmer had been deported back to Canada.
Right, he had immigration problems, yeah.
Yeah, oh boy, did he ever. And so was with them and wound up being with them only about 4 months because Bruce Palmer snuck back into the country. And
you could do in those days.
Yeah, Stephen gave him the gig back on kind of short notice, I must say. So there I am sitting in this expensive house up in Laurel Canyon and now gigless. So I'm out having my coffee on my veranda, and my next door neighbor was Jim Valby, who was with Paul Revere and the Raiders. He was Harpo in that group.
Okay.
And so I'm looking out there, and he's got someone out there having coffee with him. And I look and I say, that's Al Kooper. I'd cross paths with the Blues Project a couple of times, the Fillmore and a couple of others. So we knew each other, passingly. Yep. He looks over and said, Jim, hey man, come on down here. I've got an idea I want to run by you. And I went down there, and he described what was going to be Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And he said, why don't you come out to New York and play bass for us? And so that was a real turning point right there. And it got me out of LA. And so I kind of had to say goodbye to all those contacts I'd made there.
Right.
And went to New York, and things just happened really quick. We got Al had sold the idea of the group to Clive Davis at Columbia before it was even put together, let alone before any songs were picked, any charts were written or anything. So we got it together, and I think we made our debut Thanksgiving there. This would have been of '67.
Right.
At Steve Paul's nightclub. Yeah, the Scene. And did our first album pretty soon after that. I mean, the band had only been really fully together and rehearsed for about a month. And they said, it's time to go into the studio, guys. So before '67 was even out, we were in the studio and made the first album, The Child is Father to the Man. And we're playing clubs in New York, primarily Cafe A Go-Go down in the Village. And then the Fillmore East opened up, and we played there several times. And people often ask me, when did you know that Blood, Sweat, and Tears had made it? I mean, this was before the second album came out with all the hit singles on it.
Right, of course, yeah.
Before we'd done the Ed Sullivan Show. How did you know that you'd made it? I said, well, one day I had my bass in a gig bag over my shoulder, and I was walking up 6th Avenue on my way to the CBS building to sign some papers or something. And I was waiting to cross 6th Avenue, and this other guy comes up, and he's got a guitar and a gig bag over his shoulder, and he looks at me and said, "Oh, you're a player." And I said, "Oh, I see you are too." And he said, "So you in a band?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm in a band here in New York." And he said, "What's the name of it?" And I said, "Blood, Sweat, and Tears." And he goes, "Yeah, right." Turns on his heel and walks away. And I said, at that moment, I knew we'd made it.
That's great. That's great.
Interesting. I studied with your successor in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Ron McClure.
Yes.
And
Ron.
he says that your role, you're playing with Blood, Sweat, and Tears was an important in the development of the instrument, the electric bass, which was really in its infancy. And I was wondering, obviously you had your peers, Jameson, Duck Dunn, but there were really no bass role models then because the instrument was indeed in its infancy. What was your approach coming from, I guess, an upright player? Is that how you translated that to the electric?
Exactly. Yeah. I'd played upright in some big bands. We even had one in high school when I was in high school, at a big band. So it was just, I think that the sound was one thing of the upright is one thing I wanted to emulate on the Fender.
Right.
And of course, as we discussed, the technique.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what made me different from my contemporaries at that time.
Who had switched over from guitar, a lot of them.
Exactly. Most of them were playing with a pick and just kind of,
you had real facility. You take, so I don't know how many years ago I was at a wedding. And of course, You Make Me So Very Happy came on. Every band known to man played that at weddings. And I'm waiting. And my wife's looking at me and going, "Don't you dare. Don't you dare." Because towards the end of that song, you are cooking like wild. And this guy, it was almost like I wanted to take the James Brown cape and put it on him and walk him off stage. But in some respects, and I don't mean this in a negative way, you were a busy player. And so where did that come from, coming out of upright and such? Because, for the most part, outside of maybe a Manius or a Scotty LaFaro, you predated Rocco in a sort of way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just, music was changing so quickly back in those days. I figured there's a niche for me to play this way, to play more notes, as long as I didn't get in the way of anything.
Right.
So I kind of feel in a way like I opened the door for Jocko, because
actually played in BS&T later on.
Yes, yeah, he sure did. And still, he to me is the god, still is.
Really?
Just love what he did.
And one of the things about, you listen to those early BS&T records was the tone of just the sound of the bass and the resonance. I know I've seen pictures of you, I think with the J bass, maybe on the first record, you put that one on Facebook, but did you use the P for the pretty much most of the records, or?
I got that J bass from Fender, who were owned by CBS at that time. And so Say, well, great, sure, I'll take a free brand new bass. And that's it kind of got me into Fender, and a lot of what I was doing was the result of having that bass.
Right.
And you know, it's got plenty of high end in the tone.
Right.
So it worked. Later on, when I went to the P bass, I think I toned that down a little bit, but I still, you know, if I heard a 16th note line that would work in a measure here, a measure there, I'd go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much Al left you to your own devices, I guess. There weren't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If anything, he got me to play in that band because of the way that I played. He knew that would work for what he had in mind.
Now, of course,
you were saying that you guys already had a deal when things were set up. I would figure, you know, Clive's no idiot, and he had basically Super Session had already gone gold. Obviously, you know, being from New York, I'm sure he saw the Blues Project at the Cafe a Go-Go.
Sure. Yeah.
So he probably figured, oh, this is a pretty solid connection. I think we'll just sign it and hope for the best. And
right.
And then, of course, the record came out. I know this is a crazy question, but do you still have the puppet of you?
Those weren't puppets; those were kids.
Oh, those were kids. Okay.
Not only were they
you
kids,
still have the kids.
We're in New York, remember? Not only were they kids, they were all professional models.
All right.
And I mean, it's like we're all, you know, this is our first big time photo shoot. You know, is in a studio. You know, and so we in the band were all, ooh, wow, you know, isn't this cool? All right. And these kids come in and they're all like, Mommy, when's my 3 o'clock? These kids were going to, you know, big time photo shoots every day of their young lives.
Wow.
And so anyway, we had them on our lap, and then they, you know, photoshopped, as it were, our faces onto their heads. That's how that came to be.
One of the great album covers of all time, really.
Oh yeah.